These are the voices that make Missouri work. This is Profiles from the Heartlander.
Well, Senator, welcome to Smithville.
Thank you.
Glad you made the trip today.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have crisscrossed the state, I'm sure, in this last few months in your candidacy, yes?
Yeah, we're getting quite familiar with I-70 and all the other interstates in the state.
For people that may not know which district you represent specifically, talk about where you come from.
Sure. So I'm currently the state senator from the 22nd district, representing Jefferson County. My kids are actually the 9th generation Jefferson Countyans. My husband's family has been there since before statehood. And so, yeah, it's very much home.
What makes Missouri special to you?
So it's really the place that I chose to be my home. My husband and I are college sweethearts. We met and married while I was at St. Louis University. And, there's something really special about the town that you chose as a young adult to come to. And so I fell in love with St. Louis and then fell in love with Chris. And he jokes that, if you marry a Texan at some point, you might live in Texas. And I say, yeah, but if you marry a Jefferson County and you will die in Jefferson County. So it's an incredible place to raise a family.
You have served in the legislature now for how long?
Almost 6 years. So 4 years in the House, and then I'm finishing up my second session in the Senate.
What have you learned about representing Missourians in the legislature?
Yeah, so what I love about the legislature is it is really a microcosm of the entire state. And so you have farmers and teachers and lawyers and doctors and people who dropped out of high school and got their GED and built businesses. You just have an incredible cross-section of people in the legislature. And for me, at least, it's an incredibly humbling place to come in and work, and a wonderful reminder that we do things differently here in America, that it's the people's house, and that each of us kind of take a turn. And we don't rely on the experts. We rely on people making their best argument. And then we all kind of try to reach a consensus of what's the best way to reach that and solve that problem. But my favorite thing about serving the legislature is that no matter where I go across the state, I think about the people who serve the people of that area. And so that's something that's really special, those relationships that are built.
The legislature used to be a more divided place politically of Republicans and Democrats not too terribly long ago. Now it's considered almost exclusively Republican dominated. That doesn't mean it doesn't come with challenges, though.
Yeah, well, we certainly have factions. We have fractures within the supermajority and within the minority party versus the majority party. But I take that also as something that's really positive, right? Because we want to have real dialogue. We want to have real disagreements. They're important disagreements. And so fighting those things out, having that deliberation, I think of as really positive too. Now, I get impatient. I think that God maybe gave me 6 children and made me a legislator to try to help me become more patient, because I'm, in all honesty, the least patient person that I know. And it takes time. And you can either go far or you can go quickly. But Missouri has not been able to get done a lot of the good red meat things that other states have done with less of a supermajority, and I get frustrated by that. But it's a good reminder to me that taking the wins one at a time and moving the ball forward is important, even if it's not as quick as I would like it to go.
So on things like maybe universal school choice, we've seen states to the north, states to the south, all around Missouri have achieved that. Missouri is closer, inching closer, and there's been some wins. Maybe we can talk about that, but why you think ultimately we haven't quite crossed that ultimate finish line yet?
Yeah, I think that just in general, Missourians want people to show them that this is the right path. And so a common refrain that you hear in the legislature is, we're the 20-something state to get this done. We want to wait and see as a people, look around and how has this impacted other states? And the truth is, education reform, parents making the decision about what's best for their children rather than the government, is wildly popular. We saw during COVID just a real gap in what people expected their schools to be teaching versus when they saw what their kids were actually being taught. We have historic levels of homeschooling. I think we're at almost 12% of Missouri's kids are being homeschooled. And the reason why is because people are so frustrated about what they're seeing. And so Senate Bill 727 was actually just signed this week and is heading to the governor's desk. That is another inch forward in universal school choice and making sure that parents are able to decide and not bureaucrats what's best for their kids. But yeah, I wish that it had gone farther and it had gone faster, but we'll take the wins where we can get them.
The issue of life, I know, is one that's very important to you, and Missouri was remarkably bold early on that issue. You want to talk about that?
In the 1890s, Missouri was the first state that was able to pass a pro-life law, and we have continued to lead all the way through some really key cases in the 80s with Gonzales, which is the first win on allowing some sorts of restriction under the Roe regime, as I call it, all the way into, I was the architect of the Missouri Stands for the Unborn Act that ended up ending abortion in the state of Missouri, thanks be to God. And, you've seen this incredible leadership from the people in the state of Missouri. They understand that life is fundamental and continue to elect legislators throughout our history that are putting that at the foremost. And we actually had another good win this week, defunding Planned Parenthood. Now, if it sounds like you've heard that story before, it's because you have. Since Missouri Republicans took over the majority about 20 years ago, we have been attempting to reform so that no money, no taxpayer dollars can go to fund an entity that provides abortion. Unfortunately, the Missouri court plan has meant that we don't have the conservative courts, although we have the conservative legislature. And what we've seen is the legislature continue to overturn those efforts. But what's different this time is we've put it into state statute. That bill is now going to the desk of the governor for his signature. And this path of defunding Planned Parenthood to make sure no taxpayer dollars can go to an entity that supports or is affiliated with an abortion provider has been upheld in other states. And so we have a framework and a path, some good precedent to be able to make sure that we stick with that. So I'm really excited to see what happens as that works its way through the courts after the governor signs it.
Your tenure in the legislature, would you say this is the most significant session, or would you cite other points in history as more significant in terms of legislative movement?
Yeah, so what's interesting is we've gotten less done this session overall. So every year there's, whether you're an audiologist or whether you're a farmer or whatever, there's something about the law that's creating a problem for you. And those types of things often aren't controversial. They're not partisan. We've done a lot less of that kind of work this session, but we've gotten a lot more of the big things done. So we're looking at getting initiative petition reform done. That sounds like a computer problem. What it means is protecting our founding documents from out-of-state interference. But I think we're going to get that done this year. I think we're going to make sure we've done some education reform, which is really important. I think we're going to see some big wins on making sure that the FRA, which is the way that we fund our Medicaid program, is able to get passed. Some good conservative wins in our state budget. So from an overall impact, it's been huge. On a volume basis, it's been very, very slow.
You have now chosen to step up and run statewide. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, so when my husband and I were talking about the ways that I could serve the state and what is available and how I could have the biggest impact, there was a real need in that race for somebody who's conservative, who's ethical, who's able to do the job. It might seem like a ministerial role, and it was up until maybe 2020, and then people saw, especially in 2022, that we need to elect people who have a backbone, who are going to stand up against executive orders saying that we're going to do things that are outside the law, whether that's drop boxes or accepting sucker bucks or a variety of different ways that we can have foreign interference in our elections, and it really woke people up. Now, Missouri, because of initiative petition process, there is also real importance in that role that we have somebody who understands good conservative principles and who can write things in a way that will withstand court scrutiny so that we're not selling our Constitution to the highest bidder from the coasts. So there was just a real need in that office for somebody. And when I looked at the slate, I didn't know who I would vote for. And so at the end of the day, that was kind of the impetus for jumping into that race.
How about election integrity in Missouri? Obviously, that's what you're discussing. Is it solid? Is it sound? Is there more that can be done? What should Missouri voters think about election integrity?
Yeah, so a lot of what we've seen out of in other places, thankfully, we haven't seen here. Now, there have been some instances of election fraud in the state of Missouri, and there's some concern about whether we should be moving to paper ballots for counting purposes. We have paper ballots and we have a process to count, and if anything is within a certain margin, then we need to be throwing open the doors widely. This shouldn't be like other counties where they put up pizza boxes to keep people from looking. If there's any concern whatsoever, if the votes are within a certain margin, you should call the heads of both parties. You should call both candidates. You should call the media, and everybody should watch as you hand count those ballots. We want to make sure that everybody really can believe in our elections. And so I do think that that's important, that we're pushing that we're continuing to make sure that we have some real integrity. And then, we've moved away from, thankfully, drop boxes, from ballot harvesting. But we also should make sure that we're not accepting dollars from outside entities to spend in the state. And unfortunately, we have seen some of that happen, and it would not under my direction. The other thing that I think we could see is right now we have school boards. It's an incredibly important fight. And in school boards, where you register is often to sign up to be on the ballot is at the secretary of the school district. Well, they're off for a lot of the time. They have funny hours. That needs to come back and happen with the county clerks, where each of those are happening, so you can get who is on the ballot before the time that those names are certified. People are wanting some more clarity there. I'd also push to get rid of our April elections. I think that we see results for our municipal and school board elections that are out of step with what's happening for the rest of the state because of the low turnout of those elections. And so I'd love to see us move those into either August or November.
Could you imagine that Democrats could regain control, or at least get equal footing with Republicans again? Could you see that day where the state turns purple again?
Well, I think that the pendulum always swings, and so it hasn't been that long. In fact, when I was first elected to the legislature just 6 years ago, we had a Democrat hold state office. It's really important that we understand that this is not something we should take for granted, and that we are hiring competent people to serve in these roles, and that if you are a competent person who's wanting to see good conservative policy, that you're putting your name on the ballot and taking your turn, because the seat does belong not to me and not to you, but to all of us, and that means taking your turn. So I would just encourage people to do this kind of public service, because it's important that we keep it a solid Republican state. I also think we can move that way if we are electing people who don't have the backbone to do what people want. People get fed up and they stop showing up to vote if they feel like their elected representatives aren't responsive to them.
Final thoughts for you, Senator, as you run for statewide office. Any final thoughts just generally about your time in the legislature or your candidacy?
Well, gosh, it's such a broad question for a senator. I'm going to filibuster myself. I just would say it's an incredible honor to serve. Missouri is a wonderful place, and I'm so proud to make it my home. And when we are going to the polls in August, it's really important to look at who does have the experience, who does have the ability to actually do that job. These roles are really important. And, it's just been an incredible honor to serve, and I'd love to earn the vote of Missourians to serve as their next Secretary of State.
Senator, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.